The day I signed the discharge papers for my mother, my in-laws were at a car dealership 2 states away, test driving an SUV they were planning to buy with money that wasn't theirs. My mother had just survived a stroke, 48 hours in the ICU, a speech therapist 3 times a day, and me sleeping in a fold-out chair that left a crease down my spine for a week. I hadn't showered properly in 4 days. I was eating vending machine sandwiches and calling my husband every few hours just to hear his voice, because his voice was the only thing that still felt safe. My husband, Elliot, had died 11 months earlier. The money the in-laws were test driving against, $620,000, was his life insurance, his 401k. The house equity we had spent 6 years building together, it was mine. It was legally, unambiguously mine. And somehow, that didn't seem to matter to them at all. I need to back up. Elliot and I got married when I was 27. He was 31, an electrical engineer, calm in the way that very few people are calm, not checked out, just steady. He made decisions slowly and kept his word absolutely. I loved that about him. I still do. His parents, his father, a retired contractor, and his mother, who had worked in property management for 30 years, had always had a particular relationship with money. Not corrupt exactly, but transactional. Everything was accounted for. Every favor had a ledger entry somewhere. I noticed it early, but told myself it was just a different family culture. My own family was messy and emotional. Theirs was structured. Neither was wrong. Then Elliot got sick. Non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, diagnosed in the spring. Gone by the following February. 10 months, we had no children. We had a house in Portland, Oregon, 2 rescue dogs, a garden he kept meticulous, and a shared dream of moving somewhere slower when we were 40. None of that mattered to the cancer. It moved on its own schedule. I was his caregiver for the last 5 months. I reduced my hours at work. I learned how to manage a PICC line. I drove him to chemo appointments and sat beside him with crossword puzzles while the IV dripped. I held his hand when he was too tired to talk. I was 31 years old, and I was watching my husband disappear by degrees, and there was nothing I could do except be there. His parents visited twice during those 5 months, once in October, once in January, 3 weeks before he died. I told myself they were processing it in their own way. I told myself the 4-hour drive from Sacramento was hard. I told myself a lot of things. Elliot died on a Thursday morning in February, quietly, the way he had lived. His mother and father were not there. I called them from the hospital parking lot. I was sitting on a curb in the cold with his jacket over my shoulders. I'd grabbed it on the way out of his room without thinking, and it still smelled like him. And I told them their son was gone. His mother cried. His father said, "We'll call you later." They did not come to the funeral. His father sent a text the night before that said they weren't feeling well and didn't want to travel. His mother sent flowers, grocery store flowers, the kind in the plastic sleeve. They arrived an hour after the service ended. I stood at the graveside with my mother, my 2 closest friends, and 6 of Elliot's co-workers. 6 people who had known him for 3 years showed up. His parents, who had known him for 31, did not. I didn't collapse. I kept expecting to, but I didn't. Something went still inside me instead, like a room after a door clicks shut. I went home. I fed the dogs. I sat in our kitchen in the dark for a long time. Then I went to sleep. The calls started 2 weeks later. His father called first. He said they were deeply sorry, that it had been a hard time for everyone, that grief was different for every person. I agreed, because what else do you say? Then he said, and I remember the exact phrasing because I've replayed it so many times. He said, "We wanted to talk to you about Elliot's estate when you're ready." I said I wasn't ready. He said, of course, whenever you are." His mother called 3 days after that. She asked how I was holding up. She asked about the dogs. She asked if I'd eaten anything. Then she said that she knew this was hard to think about, but that they'd spoken to a financial advisor, and there were some things about the estate that they felt needed to be discussed as a family. I said there was no estate to discuss. Everything was in order. Elliot had been meticulous. She said she understood, but that family was family, and they hoped I would keep that in mind. I didn't know yet what she meant. I would find out. My mother had her stroke 6 weeks after Elliot died. A minor one, the doctor said. Though I'm not sure what's minor about your mother losing the ability to form sentences for 4 days. She recovered well. She's stubborn in the way that keeps people alive. But those first 72 hours in the ICU were some of the most frightening of my life. And I spent them alone, because I had already used up every favor I had from friends just getting through the funeral. I called my in-laws from the hospital. Not because I expected anything. I think I just needed to tell someone. His mother said, "Oh, how awful, keep us posted." That was it. That was the whole conversation. She did not ask which hospital. She did not ask if I needed anything. She did not offer to come. I sat with that for a moment, and then I put my phone down and I went back inside to sit with my mother, and something in me finished hardening. My mother was discharged after 8 days. I drove her to her apartment, got her settled, arranged for a home health aide 3 mornings a week. I was running on caffeine and stubbornness and something I can only describe as controlled fury. The kind you don't let out because you can't afford to fall apart. It was the day I got home from dropping off my mother that I found the letter. It had been sent certified mail. I'd missed the delivery, picked it up from the post office on my way back from my mother's. The return address was a law office in Sacramento. Inside was a 4-page letter informing me that my in-laws were pursuing a claim against Elliot's estate on the grounds that certain had been intended as a family legacy, and that they believed they were entitled to a portion of the life insurance proceeds and the equity from the home sale to support the care and well-being of his younger brother, who had recently gone through a divorce and was experiencing financial hardship. His younger brother, who I had met 6 times in my life. His younger brother, who had not attended the funeral either. I read the letter 3 times. Then I set it down on the kitchen counter. I stood there for a long time looking at the window above the sink, at the garden Elliot had built, the raised beds he'd made from cedar planks the summer before he got sick, and I thought, so this is what it is. I thought about calling someone. Instead, I called a lawyer. She was a probate and estate attorney. She had an office in Southeast Portland, and she had the kind of voice that makes you believe everything is going to be handled. I walked her through the timeline. Elliot's will, his beneficiary designations, the life insurance policy, the TO deed on the house. Everything had been done correctly. Everything had been done years before he was diagnosed, which mattered legally because it removed any argument about deathbed influence. She listened to all of it and then she said, "They have no case." I said I knew that. I said I also knew that didn't necessarily stop people. She said, "You're right. It doesn't. So let's make sure you're ready." I started documenting everything, every call, every text. I bought a cheap voice recorder app and logged a date and time of every contact from my in-laws. I screenshot messages and backed them up to the cloud the same day I received them. I kept a running document of every interaction going back to Elliot's diagnosis. Dates, what was said, who was present. It turned out I had been quietly building this record for over a year, without fully realizing that's what I was doing. Then came the call. I still think about late at night when I can't sleep. It was a Saturday morning, 3 weeks after the letter. His mother called. I almost didn't answer. I answered. She started gently. She said she hoped the legal letter hadn't upset me, that it was just a formality, that they wanted to talk before things got complicated. I said things were already complicated. She said she understood, and then she pivoted so smoothly I almost missed it. And she said that maybe I needed more support than I was getting, that grief could do things to a person's judgment, that she'd talked to their family doctor and he agreed that sometimes people in extended mourning needed professional help, the kind that was more structured than just talking to friends. I said, "Are you suggesting I need to be hospitalized?" She paused. She said, "We're just concerned." I said, "I'm going to stop you there." I ended the call. I sat on my kitchen floor with my back against the cabinet doors, and for the first time since Elliot died, I cried. Not the manageable kind, the kind that takes everything out of you. I cried until there was nothing left. And then I sat there in the quiet for a while, and then something happened that I don't have a better word for than I became clear. Not angry. Clear. I got up. I washed my face. I texted my attorney and told her about the call. She said it was important that I had it documented. I said I did. Then I opened my laptop and I started working. His mother was on my emergency contact list. I had added her years ago when Elliot was first diagnosed, in case something happened to me. I removed her. His father was listed as an alternate contact on one of my bank accounts, an old account from when Elliot and I had first consolidated finances, and I had filled out paperwork in a rush. I updated it. Elliot had given his parents login information to a streaming account we shared years ago. I changed the password. He had mentioned once that his father knew the code to the lockbox on our old house. We had sold it 7 months after Elliot died. But I checked the paperwork anyway. Nothing owed. I went down the list. Every digital access, every shared account, every loose thread I had let go because I'd had bigger things to think about. I pulled each one closed. It took most of that Saturday. By the end, I felt like I had walked through every room of a house and locked the windows. My attorney sent a formal response to the Sacramento law office the following week. It outlined Elliot's estate plan in detail, the legal standing of each designation, and the relevant Oregon statutes. It was 8 pages and cost me $1,200, and it was the best money I have ever spent. The Sacramento law office did not respond for 3 weeks. When they did respond, their letter was shorter, more hedged. They said their clients were open to an informal discussion to avoid further legal expense. My attorney wrote back and said I was not interested in an informal discussion, and that any further contact should go through her office. There was one more attempt. His father called from a number I didn't recognize. A neighbor's phone, I found out later. I answered thinking it was a spam call I would just hang up on. When I heard his voice, I said, "I'm going to forward this recording to my attorney," and I hung up. He did not call again. The claim was formally withdrawn 4 months after it was filed. I got a 1-paragraph letter from the Sacramento law office informing me that their clients had decided not to pursue the matter further. I read it standing in my kitchen, same spot where I'd read the first letter. The garden was visible through the window, the raised beds, the cedar planks Elliot had measured twice and cut once, the way he did everything. I put the letter in a folder in my filing cabinet, and I made myself a cup of coffee. The $620,000 did not go to a brother-in-law I barely knew. It went in part toward buying a small house in a neighborhood I love, 20 minutes from my mother. It went toward paying off the last of my student loans, and $40,000 of it went into an engineering scholarship fund I set up at the university where Elliot got his degree, awarded annually to a first-generation student studying electrical engineering. The scholarship has his name on it. It will have his name on it for a long time. I don't talk to his parents. I don't expect to. I spent a long time feeling guilty about that. Guilty in the way you feel guilty when you've been told your whole life that family is supposed to mean something permanent, that you don't give up on people, that forgiveness is always the goal. I worked through most of that guilt in therapy, in the kind of sessions where you say the true thing out loud instead of the kind thing. The true thing is, they were not there when their son was dying. They were not there when I buried him, and when I was on the floor of the ICU waiting room praying my mother would be okay. They were having a conversation about how to get access to money that belonged to me. People show you who they are in the hardest moments. That is not a cliché, it is the realest thing I know. I still have the dogs. I still have the garden. I water the raised beds every other evening when the weather is warm enough, and sometimes I stand out there longer than I need to, just in the quiet. Elliot built those beds to last. He built most things that way. So did I, it turns out. I just didn't know it yet.